So welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining in for this webinar on the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. My name is Megan. I'm an Oceans Associate with Environment America. Environment America is a nonprofit organization working to protect the places that all of us love and promote the core environmental values that we all share, such as clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean energy to power our lives. Along with Environment California, which is one of 29 state environmental groups that make up Environment America, we are working to protect some of the amazing areas off the coast of California. And we're here today because an incredible stretch of California's ocean is missing protection from threats such as oil drilling. And we need to protect this wild hub of ocean life, which is home to sea otters, seals, migratory whales, and dolphins. And this would be the first indigenous-led marine sanctuary designation and would protect Chumash sacred sites on and offshore. And we at Environment America have been supporting the Chumash people in their effort to designate the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And in 2020, we delivered over 10,000 public comments in support of designation. And there is a real opportunity to designate a sanctuary here, and we want to continue to build momentum for this effort. So we're really glad you're all here today to join us. So to kick it off, I'm going to play a short video to introduce the Chumash area. And this is compiled from Courtney Gerard's film, Sacred Waters, and Terry Lilly's film, Central Coast Kelp Forest. And you can find the links to the full trailers to these videos in the chat and links to their websites to see more of their work.
The ocean is our life. Grandmother Ocean is where all things come from.
A lot of the wildness that was once here in our state is still alive in a special way off our coast and marine ecosystems.
It's really quite eerie because people look at the kelp bed and they see this solid mass of kelp on top. But when you drop underneath it, you don't see that. And you see this thin layer of kelp on the top and then these stipes. But when you look back up, you can see the sun coming through the holes in the kelp canopy. It looks like the sun is dancing. These animals can be the goofiest animals in the world. They will zoom right in front of you. They will come right up to the camera, look right in your face, and you can tell they are very curious about what they're seeing. And it's like going to a planet deep in space for the first time. And what I realized after doing these dives, that we basically have Mars right out here in the ocean. We have gone to another world. This is such a special place that very few people ever get to visit.
Ocean it's really beautiful, and it's a mystery how all of it works.
I love the ocean. National marine sanctuaries are permanent, and they have become the most powerful tool to prohibit offshore oil and gas development.
People protect what they love. How can you protect what you don't understand?
And I think that's what our conversation is about. What to do about this special legacy of wildness that's been passed forward to us in the oceans.
So clearly this area is beautiful and full of life and history. The Northern Chumash tribe first nominated the Chumash Heritage Area for permanent federal protection as a sanctuary in 2015. This protection would safeguard the area against threats including oil drilling, and the recent catastrophic oil spill in Orange County really underscores the importance of protecting our ocean and ocean life from future oil slicks that impact marine ecosystems for years into the future. And the sanctuary would protect an offshore area along 140 miles of coastline from Gaviota Creek in Santa Barbara County to Santa Rosa Creek in Cambria. And it would complete a sanctuary network from north of San Francisco to south of Santa Barbara by connecting 2 existing marine sanctuaries, thereby giving ocean wildlife necessary space to feed and to roam. And it's a biodiversity hotspot with a range of habitat types from coastal estuaries to deep sea canyons, with migratory paths frequented by marine mammals and patches of krill where dolphins and whales stop to feed, and nutrient-rich upwelling zones that support many forms of life. So we want to ensure that the sanctuary is designated as soon as possible as the area faces growing pressure from climate change and oil drilling. This issue is increasingly urgent, so that's why we're here today. So we're going to hear from some of the sanctuary's experts and advocates on the importance of this place and what its protection would mean for the ocean in California. So first we'll hear from Violet Sage Walker, Northern Chumash Tribal Chairwoman, on the cultural importance of this area and what its protection would mean for the Chumash people and their longstanding connection to the ocean. Then we'll hear from U.S. Representative Salud Carbajal on what designation will mean for his district and how Californians can get involved. And next, California's Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, will explain why he has been a longtime supporter of protections and what the sanctuary would mean for California. And then Dr. Dawn Murray from Antioch University in Santa Barbara will describe the ecological importance of this area, her connection to it, and what protection means for its wildlife. And just a reminder, please leave your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box if you're on Zoom, and we'll get to as many as we can after the panel discussion. And for those of you watching on Facebook Live, you can put your questions in the Facebook chat, and we'll be watching for those too. And also just a note, Secretary Crowfoot does have to leave the webinar after he speaks since he's traveling to Glasgow for the climate conference. So we're very grateful that he took the time to be here today with us. So with that, I will pass it over to Violet Sage Walker.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. My name is Violet Sage Walker. I'm the chairwoman of the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, carrying on the legacy of my father, Fred Collins, as the nominator for the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And I had told you before we went live that I wasn't going to cry, but you didn't tell me that he was the first one speaking in the video. And so when I heard you play the video and I heard my dad's voice and I heard him talking, I was like, you know, that was a shock. And so I just wanted to say that, you know, it's something I've been getting used to saying, you know, talking about my father recently passing. And I just wanted everybody here to know that he had a lot of love for all the work that you've all done, Environment America, and your huge turnout, you know, with your 10,000 supporters plus. Representative Carbajal, he had a lot of respect and a lot of appreciation for all the work you've done, and Secretary Crowfoot, and everybody that's been behind the scenes doing this, getting us to this point. He really appreciated all of you. And the last days of his life, we had a lot of conversation about you know, his legacy. And he had told me that the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary and protecting this coastline and our sacred sites was the most important thing that he ever did in his life. So it is deeply personal to all of our people. And we are so grateful for all of our partners and everybody that's been with us on this journey. And hopefully to hear the next leg of this journey would be to hear moving into the designation process. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Violet. And I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your father, Fred Collins' legacy and the concept of thrivability, which I've heard him talk about in the past, and just how this sanctuary designation would honor that and honor his legacy in that concept.
Well, when we saw the video, you saw the underwater, the forests underwater are as great as any forest above ground. And I thought that my dad created that word thrivability. And it wasn't until recently that I had actually heard other people using that word. And what his thrivability was his response to sustainability. He always says that we should not sustain where we're at now, and we're not doing good enough. And he always said we can do better, and we can not sustain the huge losses and the amount of fishing and the huge loss in habitat and the climate change that we're facing and experiencing and the ocean acidification, all this stuff. He said that sustaining it wasn't good enough, that we need to reverse it. We need to make it thrivable. We need to make it so that animals and species come back and flourish. It was always, one of his examples that when we were, growing up, we ate and fished out of our creeks and streams here on the coast. And today you can't eat the fish out of our streams and creeks going into the ocean. You can't drink the water. And in my generation, we drank the water right out of the streams here in Avila Beach. And so we need to do better. And that was always his underlying message, was that thrivability means we should be where we were 100 years ago or 150 years ago as far as the climate change. And we have the science and technology and the genius people working around in every aspect of the government and in private enterprise to be able to reverse the effects of climate change that we're experiencing. So when I love the word thrivability, and it always makes me think of my dad, but yeah, he always said that we can do better than sustaining what we have now. And I really believe that we can. So, and that's the first step with the sanctuary, is these protections are something that we desperately need. And evidenced by all the oil spills going back to 1969 on the coast of Santa Barbara up until just a couple of weeks ago, we can definitely do better. And I think that's incorporating conservation with renewable energy and all of these things working together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's such a beautiful concept. And we are being constantly reminded, especially with the recent oil spill, that sustaining what we're currently doing is not going to work for the future. And then before we move on, Violet, I also just wanted to ask for you to elaborate on the significance of this effort being led by the Northern Chumash tribe.
It's a beautiful partnership with the Northern Chumash tribe and federal partners like NOAA. And the Chumash tribe picked NOAA because of its long history working with our Chumash people in the Channel Islands and other areas, and with other sanctuary programs and other marine protected areas. And we felt that NOAA would be a good partner and would be a just partner with the Chumash people, and would be an understanding partner of our needs and our wishes and our community. And so it's really important for us to have somebody that we can work with. And we feel comfortable with NOAA. We feel comfortable with the supporters and the representatives and stuff that have been with us through this whole journey, because it has taken a lot of people to get us to this point, between our senators and our new vice president. All of these people have supported us in some way or another to get us here. And so we've definitely selected a partner that we feel would do justice to the importance of the coast. And especially with Point Conception being one of our most significant sacred sites, and Point Conception being there around the area of Vandenberg, and our other sacred sites like Morro Rock, Li'isamu, and Diablo Canyon, and the Oceana Dunes, and all these areas that are super important to our people would be protected off of the coastline with the sanctuary designation. So I could go on forever about this, but the main thing is that we feel like we've chosen the best possible people to represent and protect this coastline. And so we're looking forward to being able to work together and to be able to be a good example for the 30 by 30 actions and the America the Beautiful, and be able to see what tribally led and co-management means and put into action. So there's a lot of good examples with state and national parks and marine protected areas and marine national monuments. And so we want to be the first national marine sanctuary to be a tribally led effort.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Violet, for speaking right now, and of course for all the work that you've tirelessly done on this since 2015 and before. And now we're going to pass it over to U.S. Representative Salud Carbajal, who represents California's 24th district, which includes the area onshore from the proposed sanctuary. And just a reminder to leave your questions for the panelists in the Q&A box or the Facebook comments, and we'll work on answering them after all the panelists have spoken. So I'll pass it over to you, Representative Carbajal.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Violet, for your great overview of all the work that has come before us. And thank you, Megan and Environment America, for putting on this conversation tonight. As many of you know, I represent the Central Coast, as Megan mentioned. But before I proceed with my comments, I just want to recognize Violet, your father, Fred Collins, for his leadership, advocating for the creation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. He is certainly a huge loss to our community, but also his passing reminds us that we need to continue to realize his vision of a marine sanctuary. Before being elected to Congress, I served in local government and have lived in the Central Coast for most of my life, or adult life, should I say. My family, when I was 5 years old, immigrated from Mexico. Growing up, my father worked as a miner in Arizona and then a farm worker in Oxnard, California. My parents and ensuing mentors like Supervisor Naomi Schwartz, who I worked for many years, taught me the importance of our natural resources and being good stewards of our environment. Later, as a county supervisor, I saw firsthand the impacts oil drilling has posed to our environment. This is why I have been a strong advocate for the designation of the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. Designating these waters off the Central Coast as a national marine sanctuary would ensure they are protected from oil drilling. It makes certain we are protecting these areas for future generations and are leaving our planet better off than we found it. While I continue to press the administration and the Secretary of Commerce to move forward with a designation, it is important for us to show there is community support for this designation. And I am extremely grateful for all the work that Violet and all other stakeholders have done to make sure that this sentiment is heard wide and loud. I encourage all of you to continue to stay engaged in the process by submitting public comments when applicable, writing to your representatives, and just continuing to be open in your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Carbajal. And before we move on, I just wanted to ask you what got you personally invested in this effort, because you've worked on it so much.
Well, I think it's the inspiration from seeing other sanctuaries and the protection that they bring to our oceans, our ecosystems. But for me personally, on this particular marine sanctuary, it's the inspiration I've gotten from the Chumash, Mr. Collins, and so many others that have been fighting and working to get this designation to become a reality. For me, that is the inspiration I draw from. And all of those that have come before us who have reminded us that the environment is very fragile, our ecosystem is very fragile, climate change is very real, and we need to address these very important issues and really make sure that we're doing everything we can to move conservation efforts forward, such as this effort.
Yeah, that's great. And I just wanted to highlight too, since you represent the area on shore from the sanctuary, what would this mean for your communities and for coastal communities on land from this area?
Well, it would mean protecting the environment. It would mean protecting our ecosystems. It would ensure that we are not overfishing in the area, that we are working with everyone to make sure that we have a sustainable ecosystem off our shore, and that we also, in doing so, remind us of the cultural heritage of the Chumash in this region. That's why the name is so fitting for this marine sanctuary. It also brings an economic value to our area, not just environmentally. And I think we need to remember that. This is a win-win in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Representative Carbajal, for your work on this. And reminder, leave your questions for the representative in the Q&A box or in the Facebook comments, and we will get to them after the panelists speak. So now I want to pass it off to Secretary Wade Crowfoot, who is California's Secretary of Natural Resources.
Megan, thanks so much for the opportunity to join. It's a real honor to be on this panel. And I first want to thank the chairwoman for your council's leadership and all that you've done. And it's remarkable to be talking about, honoring your father's legacy and moving forward together. So much of our planet is in crisis. And one thing we clearly need to do is learn from those who have been stewarding our environment since time immemorial. And in California, that's our tribal communities. So one thing we're working to do in really everything that we're advancing is to actually listen and learn from our tribal communities and tribal governments. So really appreciate all that you've done and feel proud to support your leadership on this effort. Want to give a big shout out to the congressman as well for being a steadfast champion on this and so many other environmental issues. And then Environmental America, you all are a driving force and the reason why this is where it's at. I want to speak just from the heart in terms of what this means to me and what I think it means to us. I'm part of a delegation of a group of folks from California in Scotland this week and next that are really doing our best to work with others across the world to sound the alarm on climate change. I don't have to tell anybody that's tuned in here that, I think it's not an exaggeration to say our life on our planet is in the balance and hangs in the balance as a result of the acceleration of climate change. Californians are living this reality daily and breathing it in through our lungs as California's forests burn, as many of our communities lack reliable water as our drought worsens, and then cities and towns are experiencing these extreme heat temperatures that threaten our most vulnerable citizens. So that planetary crisis is already here. I think a crisis of planetary proportions that not enough people know about is our biodiversity crisis. We are losing tens of thousands of species of life off our planet in real time. We're in what scientists consider the 6th stage of mass extinction, a human-caused extinction in the planet. Megan mentioned California is a biodiversity hotspot, one of 35 places on the planet that scientists have identified for its incredible natural richness of plants and animals, other forms of life, but then also these stressors that threaten that biodiversity. So for those who work on the environment and stewarding our world, our lands, the time has never been more important to take action and make our voices heard. So what does that mean? And what does that mean in relation to this what we hope is this proposal for the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary? We have to clearly do some very important things. And the first is move beyond fossil fuels. We need to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, to stop extracting oil from the planet and then rid ourselves of the addiction of ourselves and our economy on fossil fuels. We have to do this with the urgency that very few things have demanded in order for us to actually stabilize the climate. We also need to uplift and empower nature to actually help us combat climate change. So-called nature-based solutions on climate change have been underemphasized. We talk a lot about technology, renewable energy, and building decarbonization and electric vehicles. That's all important stuff. But remarkably, there's so much that actually nature can do to help us remove carbon from the atmosphere and stabilize our planet. And so that brings us to the action here. And the reason why I'm joining is to thank you all. I mean, you have on this call the leaders who are really driving this process and telling you that national marine sanctuaries are critically important to protect our coast, to combat climate change, and to preserve biodiversity. As I understand it, there are 5 national marine sanctuaries on the West Coast, and each of them was established for really important reasons. Think about the famous Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Truly changed the future of that bay from horribly degraded to one of the biodiversity hotspots of the Pacific Ocean. Chairwoman would know much more than I would about just how critically important the Central Coast and its ocean is, certainly as the sacred sites. Point Conception, scientifically, as I understand it, is considered one of, if not the most important coastal marine ecosystems in California, where the cold water of Northern California meets the warmer water of Southern California, and remarkable life develops in complex ecosystems. So the proposal here to protect this land from, or I should say this water, from future oil drilling, to focus on protecting its biodiversity and safeguarding that biodiversity as the ocean continues to be impacted by climate change and ocean acidification is critically important. And I can't emphasize enough the work that everybody's doing to turn this concept into a proposal and ultimately into reality is front and center to everything that we're working to do to enroll nature in the fight against climate change, in the fight against species loss, to achieve our 30 by 30 goals in California and the similar goals in the at the federal level. So just you have a strong ally and a strong supporter in our administration, and we look forward to working with you in coming weeks and months as this concept again hopefully moves into the formal proposal and then moves through the process into a sanctuary. So Megan, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot, and thank you for being such a strong voice and advocate for this in the policy realm. It's so valuable to have a strong policy voice behind it. And before we move on to Dr. Don Murray, I just wanted to ask you, in your role as Secretary of Natural Resources, of course, this is a hub of natural resources. What does this area mean to you, and why is this effort something that you stood behind so strongly?
Yeah, thank you. Well, one is we have a remarkable network of marine protected areas in state waters. And state waters, as you know, encompass water from essentially the beach 3 miles offshore. And then we move into federal waters from 300 to 200 miles offshore, and then it becomes international waters. So a lot of folks probably that are participating in the conversation were part of establishing our Marine Protected Area, or MPA network. And these work in complement to these broader, bigger national marine sanctuaries. And so from our perspective, actually having an added sanctuary will be helpful to the goals that we're trying to achieve through our marine protected area, including recovering just the rich biodiversity that we've lost over time. I think more personally, I'm really struck at just how unique this area of the coast is. I mean, to anybody who's visited or lives there, you know how beautiful it is. I've been educated by Chumash people of just how critical Point Conception is and other areas along the coast are as sacred sites. And then as I've learned more about the ocean science, as chair of our Ocean Protection Council, from our scientists there, I've learned how important this part of the coast is to our overall marine environment. So for all of those reasons, I'm really energized by the work that's happening.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that is a great point about how this is a marine sanctuary complements California's marine protected areas as a separate entity that is so valuable still in conserving our ocean and being a really valuable way to conserve heritage and biodiversity. So thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. And now we're going to pass it over to Dr. Don Murray, Environmental Studies Professor at Antioch University and another amazing advocate for this marine sanctuary.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I am Dawn Murray, and I just really want to thank Chairwoman Walker and Representative Carbajal. And did we just lose Secretary Crowfoot? I guess he's already on his way to Scotland. And everyone who has joined in supporting this National Marine Sanctuary. Many of you have already spoken about the importance of this area of our coastline, and I just want to say a little bit more. I am a marine biologist, an oceanographer, a professor, a mother, and I have studied the effects of climate change on intertidal plant and animal communities along the shore of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, specifically at Santa Cruz and Monterey. I continue to bring my students into nature for natural history courses, and I see their wonder and amazement over picking up invertebrates and algae and, seeing whales. And over the years, my kids and I have joined the Chumash during their fall Tomal crossing from the mainland to Santa Cruz Island to Limu, and celebrating and honoring their connection and human connection to nature, singing songs and being in ceremony and gathering to greet the Tomal and the paddlers on the beaches. I've also, as a member of the Tribal Trust Foundation, supporting the preservation of Indigenous cultures and wisdom through education and promoting living in harmony with nature and each other. It's been kind of part of my bones and part of my teaching philosophy and part of how I live. During my graduate work, I co-created an intertidal monitoring program called Limpets. And this is work that's done now through NOAA, and it's a citizen science program monitoring coastal ecosystems of California, and really engages the youth to develop a scientific understanding of the ocean. We monitor the biology in rocky intertidal and sandy beach ecosystem, and we have a goal to provide publicly accessible, scientifically sound long-term data in marine sanctuaries for marine resource management and the scientific community. And we have over 25 sites along the coast. One is within this proposed designation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. But I grew up along the coast of California in Santa Barbara. I live here now. I walk the beaches. I grew up saving small creatures that washed up in holdfasts, putting them back in buckets and swimming them out to the kelp forest to hopefully live another day. And I feel a deep connection to this place, this land, this ocean, and the creatures who live here. And I so relate and admire Fred Collins and thank Violet, who's fiercely and passionately carrying on what Fred started in this designation process. And Violet wrote about her father that he's a fighter for the human race, the elders and the wisdom of the ancients, the warriors, the people who protected the fragile and the weak or the small, and the giants who fought for the oppressed and celebrated a beautiful lived life. And his legacy lives on in this designation. And it feels incredibly, incredibly important, not just because of the Chumash sacred sites and the villages and the solstice alignments and the ceremony sites. There's an incredible history in this area for occupation dating over 20,000 years ago, but also the ecological importance of this area. And we've heard about these oceanographic features, but along the west coast of California or California's on the west, along the coast of California, Point Conception is that southernmost point where the coastline shifts from an orientation of roughly north-south to east-west. And that California current moves farther offshore as it continues in its southward flow. And at Point Conception, it's the southernmost major upwelling center on the west coast of the US. There's 3 major upwellings here in this proposed designation site. One is a persistent upwelling site where nutrient-rich water comes up from over 9,000 feet deep. And Arguello Canyon is really such an important area for this marine life that enhances the ecosystems of the sanctuaries north and south of this proposed area. And we see blue whales and fin whales and humpback killer whales, sperm whales, gray whales in this area. So important these nutrients are to the phytoplankton and to the bottom of the food chain, the most important pieces of the food chain, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, the smaller fish. And this area is part of this transition zone where cool surface waters in the north and warmer waters are to the south of Point Conception. So it's often called a biogeographic boundary, and it's a limit. It's a limit where you'll see southern species that live in more warm water kind of you stop seeing them north of Point Conception. So and cold water species that are up in Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary kind of don't make it around the bend of Point Conception. So invertebrates and algae for intertidal species and composition and that very, very rich biodiversity that we see along our coast that you see nowhere else in the world. It's incredibly important, this area. There's also a lot of larvae recruiting. So larvae are the baby sea urchins and sea stars and all those creatures that you think of that you see that are invertebrates living in the intertidal zone. They spend their life floating around, their beginning of their life floating around in the water, looking for a place to settle. And white abalone, for example, live in this zone. These were the first marine invertebrate to be listed as endangered. There's also the Santa Lucia Bank. It's a area where part of the seabed has been pushed up thrust. And this area is amazing for upwelling and nutrient-rich waters. It's great for fishing and charging the food web. There's Chinook and coho salmon and squid that use these nutrients for eating and for their food, for their life cycle. And there's amazing benthic communities of worldwide significance. You could look at the Nautilus team video. They explored this area. Incredible biodiversity of sponges and corals and fish and snails. And this complex topography offshore is a result of the meeting place of these 2 major tectonic plates. So the Chumash heritage of this thrivability concept is just fascinating when you're thinking even of biodiversity and the ability of these species to thrive. It really demands that this area be protected. We have Chinook and coho salmon in this area that are migrating from streams to the ocean, and fry that migrate to the sea after as few as 3 months and use this area as feeding grounds. So we also have in this area the southern sea otter population. They're also known as threatened, extremely vulnerable to oil spills. And that was the primary reason they were listed in the first place. So as a consequence of their threatened status, they're depleted even under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So there's a really small marine mammal. They rely on subcutaneous fat and oil on their fur, if oil gets on their fur, it just kills the animals. So we really need to maintain this area as an oil-free zone. So the high dune area of this proposed sanctuary has the western snowy plover, which is also a critically threatened species, and they forage for small invertebrates in the wet or the dry sand. If you've ever seen a nesting area, you'll immediately fall in love with these small little birds that blend in with the sand. Their eggs look exactly like the sand, and they lay them right in the sand. But they're fascinating to watch their behavior, to lure you away from their nest is to act as if they're injured, and just beautiful, beautiful creatures. And I think my time is up, Megan, but I haven't gotten to even the wetlands and the estuaries, the Morro, Estero, and San Luis Bay estuaries, and the clapper rails. There's 2 clapper rails that live in this area that are both endangered. And, finding one of those is like finding something in, a present on your birthday that you've always wanted. It's just magical. They're secretive birds, and they live in dense vegetation, and they're just about the size of a chicken or smaller, but just beautiful, kind of cinnamon colored chest, and foraging on mud, flat areas, eating mussels and crabs, and incredible thriving kelp forests in this area, and pinnipeds, including the northern elephant seal, and spawning areas and rookeries. And there's nurseries for sharks, skates, rays, and fish, and even the unarmored 3-spine stickleback, which is a small scaleless freshwater fish, lives in this area to be designated. So there's a diverse array of habitats that are critical, and vulnerable species, endangered species, threatened species, all living in this Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary proposed site. And I'm a strong, strong advocate for this designation, and so appreciative of all the work everyone has done along the way to make it happen and to get us this far. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murray, for teaching us not only about the ecological importance of this area, but also the beauty of it and the magic of it, which is just such a beautiful testimony to those things. And those things are so important as well. And before we get to audience questions, I wanted to ask you, you touched on this, but if you could elaborate a little on the importance of the fact that this area connects to existing marine sanctuaries to the north and south, and what that means for those species you talked about in these places.
Oh, it's so important. So you can see on the maps that basically this proposed sanctuary moves from Cambria down to Gaviota Coast. And we recently in 2015 had a huge oil spill off Refugio Beach that was devastating for the habitat and the mammals and the birds and the invertebrates and the rocks, and the species that live in the sand were all affected. And this space that is being proposed to protect is the connector between those two. And that makes it so important for these species that are migrating, and they don't live in one house like we do, right? They're migrating through these areas and using all of this ocean area, and numerous, kind of the salmon are using creeks and the ocean, and we really need to, with the oceanography even, where you can see the California current coming down from Monterey and bringing nutrient-rich water down across, this sanctuary and offshore from California and Point Conception. Everything is connected. Everything is connected, and to have that space also preserved and protected would just be absolutely imperative and huge for all of these species. I can't say enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important, and you explain it so well. So thank you so much, Dr. Murray.
You can call me Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn. And we don't have, unfortunately, Representative Carbajal or Secretary Crowfoot on anymore. They are very busy, of course, with this week's climate conference. So we're so grateful that they were able to make it and speak to us. And now we're going to answer some audience questions. So this question is for either of you, probably more geared towards Chairwoman Walker. And this is from Abby Vandergraaf, and a few other attendees have asked what citizens can do to help make the sanctuary a reality.
That's a good question, because I think actually you could probably answer that question better, because you're the one that pulled together 10,000 individual comments on our last round of nomination. So continuing with the support letters, volunteering, we're going to have a really good opportunity coming up soon. At our website is called shumashsanctuary.org, and you can go on our website and sign up to write letters, and you can volunteer, and you can actually become a sanctuary ambassador, which we will be offering a either a Zoom or potentially in the future in-person trainings on how you can hold your own events and educate your own community members and take care of your own neighborhoods by having gatherings in your own home or in your own neighborhoods, facilities, and promote the sanctuary. And we'll give you all the opportunity to have different kinds of brochures and pamphlets and shirts and hats and whatever you need for the sanctuary to promote that in your own community. So we won't make you wear the otter costume, though. We do have full body otter costumes, and you don't have to wear that. So you can become a sanctuary ambassador, and you do not have to wear the otter costume. So we do have the Southern Sea Otter costumes that we bring out for special occasions.
That's awesome. I think that otter costume is actually a large part of the appeal. So. Glad you brought that up. And the Chumash Sanctuary website is linked in the Zoom chat for people to visit and participate. There's also a petition on there that everyone should sign for designation. And we will be sending around more information following this too. We'll have a link to the recording of this webinar, and we'll also be sending this webinar to NOAA and offices on the Hill to remind them of the importance of moving forward designation of this incredible place. And we also have gotten a couple questions about what the timeline and process for designation looks like right now, kind of where we are in that.
I could probably answer that one again. We have completed the 5-year review, which you helped us with, and a bunch of different community members, elected officials, and stakeholders helped us put the comments into the 5-year review. And at this point, we have completed everything that we were asked and tasked to do. And we were just told that the most important thing is increased grassroots and community support. So consider a grassroots campaign by, telling your neighbors and your family and your friends to support the sanctuary, whether it's through writing letters or anything like that. At this point, we're in a holding pattern to hear back from NOAA on the potential designation process to begin. And so that will be a letter of intent that they will publish. And at that point, then the intents public comment will be initiated by NOAA and their offices. And that is when all the public will have the ability to, and the stakeholders will have their ability to go through and negotiate what's important, including the boundaries. And so the boundaries haven't been finalized, and they won't be finalized until this negotiation between the stakeholders has been finalized. So the boundaries and the different unique aspects of the sanctuary that will be developed through all of these stakeholder input. And that's one of the driving forces behind the ability for NOAA to host and to talk and to be tasked with this enormous responsibility of including all the various different stakeholders. So it's a lot of work for them. So we appreciate that that they're very inclusive of community, different viewpoints from the community.
Yeah, I think that's great that you pointed that out, because the timeline can be sometimes stretched out longer than the public wants, but it's because NOAA is taking into account these stakeholder perspectives. And this question is for Dawn. I know you didn't get to discuss wetlands as much as you might have wanted to, and a few people have asked if this area includes wetlands and how it helps wetlands.
This area does include wetlands. There's, let's see, there are 3 estuaries that I know of, and Violet, correct me with anything that I say that's not right. 3 estuaries: Morro, Estero, and San Luis. And estuaries are incredibly important areas, you know, right next to the ocean. There can be freshwater input from a stream or a river, and numerous species of fish and sharks and skates and rays use estuaries as nursery grounds. But it's also the area where you'll see, you know, the pickleweed and certain plants that grow, the sagebrush and other plants that are growing that kind of protect the banks and stop erosion. So, and this is the area where those rails, those birds live. And yeah, so it's part of this proposed area has wetlands.
Yeah, that's great. And there were also a couple questions about oil drilling. So I think both of you could probably answer this kind of 2-pronged question. Will this designation phase out all oil drilling? And what would that mean for the biodiversity of the area? How will it help it recover over time if there's no more oil drilling allowed here?
I can go first if you want, Dawn. Currently, the designation doesn't include any active platforms. So the designation of the sanctuary, there's no active oil drilling inside the sanctuary, but the leases that have come available, there are, I think, I want to say somewhere near 37 potential offshore oil leases in this area. I'm not exactly sure on the number, but those leases will be negotiated for in this process to be closed down forever. And that would be no new oil drilling off of the coast. So the active platforms that are closest to the southern border of the proposed sanctuary, I believe, are being actively decommissioned, and hopefully will be put into some type of reef habitat, or decommissioned and removed, and helped some other repurposing of those platforms. I'm not exactly sure what the process is, but most of the platforms in the channel, I think, have seen better days, and I think have a timeline coming up to plan on not using those anymore. But if we think about when this first started with the Chumash people, I just wanted to give a little quick history that our elder Palula Kus and some of the Chumash coastal band had actually occupied Point Conception to prevent the gas land project back in the 70s. And that is when we originally had the group, the Brotherhood of the Tamal, that started the original building of our redwood plank tamals and crossing to the islands. And that was also around the same time as the 1969 oil spill in Santa Barbara. So she was a big component of the what we now know as Earth Day, that started in response to the 1969 oil spill. And she has recently passed also. So it's been a really devastating time for our community. And so when we talk about offshore oil, we talk about the coast here as being some of the launching points for a lot of the modern environmental movement. And a lot of these organizations became what we see today because of the offshore oil spills that we've had here on the coast of California that have been so devastating. And now they've obviously been dwarfed several times by other oil spills like the Deepwater Horizon and Exxon Valdez. But our people have been advocating. I'm the third generation to advocate against offshore oil drilling and the protection of our coast, especially Point Conception, because of all the things that that Dawn had said too about the magical ecosystem that we have off the coast here, and the spiritual connection to our people. And maybe the two are connected, that the reason it's such a magical and spiritual place is because of you know, the legends and the people that live here and the connection that we have to that place. So banning offshore oil is one of the biggest and most important issues with the marine sanctuary, and NOAA would give us that help and that protection. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And then the second part of that question, Dawn, you might be able to answer this, what it would look like for the ecosystems and the biodiversity if offshore oil drilling is no longer allowed in this area, or if it is alternatively.
Well, that's a great question. It's probably yet to be determined. There's a lot of research still going on at areas that are recovering from, you know, oil and oil drilling. We know that there's natural seepage here, but in terms of, you know, a tanker or a type of spill from harvesting the oil, that's where the biggest danger is. And some of these, the endangered birds and invertebrates and mammals that are living in this area, you know, would not recover from a significant spill. So it would be incredibly important to not have oil exploration in this area.
And just to add to that, the reason we formed the group that we have now, the coalition, was in response to seismic testing. So if you remember back about 7 or 8 years ago, the group, the coalition that we have formed around this current nomination was opposing seismic testing, which would have eventually been used for new oil and gas leases up and down our coast, all the way up to Morro Bay, because there is a lot of oil in the Morro Bay area. So this group was, they approached my dad at that time, and there was a good picture of us all at the Coastal Commission, a bunch of different Chumash organizations and people and allies at the Coastal Commission all came together to oppose seismic testing, and which would have eventually been used for oil drilling.
Yeah, so incredibly important. And we are almost out of time, but I think this last question is a great one to end on. Melissa asks, what does the future look like for this area's ecosystem if the designation doesn't happen? And also what the future looks like for this area's community if designation doesn't happen?
Dawn, did you want to take that? Or you want me to take that? I can take that, because I just want to say that I don't think that that is possible. So I would not want to say that out loud. I wouldn't even want to speculate and have my dad hear me talking like this. So I'm not going to answer that question because this is so important, and this was his life's work, and we will always be here, and we have always been here, and we will continue to be here. And so we are not going away, and I have been told by elders that have passed that I have to do this. So that means we're going to keep showing up until this happens. So it would be easier for them to designate it than to listen to me for the rest of their lives. And in the words, of my father, this is the most important thing he's ever done in his life. And we're going to continue to be here, and we're going to continue to show up, and we're going to continue to fight for this, no matter what. So
we will not back down. We will not give up.
That's a perfect answer. Designation will happen. So it's not even a question of what it will look like if it doesn't, because it will. So thank you, Violet, for
now,
that.
now make sure that those people, everyone in Washington sees that, because there's a lot of pressure. My dad has a lot of weight now. He has all the ancestors on his side. So
yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today in this excellent panel conversation. Thank you for tuning in to the attendees and joining us to learn about this incredible ocean place. And remember to explore the Chumash Sanctuary website for more information. That's linked in the chat. And you can also follow the Chumash effort on their social media, which we will link here in the chat as well. And this was such a great conversation. I really appreciate everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting it together.
Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
And yeah, have a good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.